There we go. Got it. Okay. Well, again, thank you all for being here. I'm Margaret Pointdexter. I'm the chairman of the board and president of the Foundation for Shackleford Horses. We are the co-managers of the Wild Herd on Shackleford Banks together with the National Park Service, Cape Lookout National Seashore, and we were given that designation in the federal legislation called the Shackleford Banks Wild Horses Protection Act, which obligated the Park Service to preserve the wild herd, and as I said, designated us as co-managers. So that's me and my introduction. I'll let you say who you are, lady, like anybody doesn't know.
You have to remind me. Sometimes I forget. I'm Sue Stuska, and I've been with the Park Service. Come on in. Do you want to sit on the floor? Yeah, come on in. Sit down here. Yeah, then you can see. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. We have two gals that just joined us, for those of you who are on the recording. Two younger gals who sat on the floor. So, yeah, I'm with the National Park Service, Cape Lookout National Seashore, and have been there for like 25 years. And, yeah, we basically are in charge of monitoring the horses along with everything else, you know, the resources and helping the visitors and stuff like that. So, yeah, we're here to give you lots of information.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Paula Gilligan, might be from around here. And I work for the North Carolina Coastal Reserve and National Estuary Research Reserve. Y'all might have heard of that as CAMA, or the Division of Coastal Management. So we are a program under a state agency with our parent department being the Department of Environmental Quality in Raleigh. And we manage 10 nature reserves from the Virginia border all the way down to the South Carolina border, with the best one being in Beaufort, which is the Rachel Carson Reserve. Know a lot of folks have personal connections to that site. That includes Carrot Island. So part of my job and managing 10 reserves, part of my job is to manage the wild horse herd at the Rachel Carson Reserve. And ever since I was a little girl, like 5 years old, I had a poster of the horses on my wall. So to know that I would end up here doing this is very, very exciting, and can't wait to share all kinds of good information and get all kinds of great questions from you all. So thanks for coming today.
I should give it back to you.
Okay.
Introduce. There's just we'll go
Okay.
in so many directions.
So I guess we'll start talking a little bit about the horses historically, how they came to be, and I'll make it short. We don't know. We're not sure. We don't have any conclusive evidence one way or the other. What we do know is that there are historical records of the presence of horses on the entire North Carolina coast, the entire length of the Outer Banks, for centuries. And there are references to their presence throughout history, both roaming wild, but also being used by people, local folks, or even people who were not local. For example, they were used by the military at times. They were used by the life-saving station at times. Farmers would bring them to the mainland and use them in connection with farming, and then take them back and turn them loose. And of course, as we know, there used to be people who lived over there too, Diamond City, on Shackleford Banks, etc., and they used the horses at various times. But eventually the people left, the horses stayed, and they're wild and iconic. And I think, as Paula mentioned, most of us who spent any time down here as kids, I didn't grow up here, but I spent an awful lot of time here as a child. We were told as children, they've always been here, and that's their home, and we're supposed to respect that. And so that's, I think that they, for local people, are symbolic of a way of life that used to exist here. I get emotional when I think about how much it's changed, but they're still there and represent the life that used to be here for people. And they're a tie to our childhoods and our a time when things were maybe a little simpler. I can remember myself going with my granddaddy to Cedar Island for the pony pinnings when I was a little girl. He would get me up. It was still dark outside. And this is in the summertime, to drive to Cedar Island to get there in time for the pony pinning and watch them swim the ponies and round them up and auction them off. And so those kinds of memories and those kinds of things, like I say, demonstrate how the horses are intrinsically tied to the lives of the people here, to their culture, to their history. And I think that's what makes them so special to lots of folks. As far as their relationship to other wild herds, all of the horses up and down the Outer Banks, as I said, they all used to cover that area. They are more related to one another than they are anything else, any other breed or herd of horse. But there are some differences and some other breeds of horses that have come in different herds. Paul will talk about that in a minute. But yeah, basically they're all cousins. There are cousin herds all up and down the coast. So yes, when you see something online about the Kerala horses, know that they are related to our local horses. The Rachel Carson horses are related. There's a relationship with the Assateague horses, arguably way, way back there. So again, all those herds up and down the coast are somewhat related.
So just to build on what Margaret said, that makes them good genetic reservoirs if we needed horses, if Kerala needed horses, if Assateague needed horses, rather than go to like an Arabian or a quarter horse or a Pasofino or, a man-made breed. We would be best off to go to another banker horse. And then we'd obviously pick and choose depending on what we wanted. For example, the Assateague herd is a good percentage of pinto horses, blacks and whites or browns and whites. And we did have a pinto mom and baby here years ago, but that color has not been prevalent in the herd. So probably not wanting to introduce something really weird would be a good idea. But there are reservoirs, genetic reservoirs.
Although easy to ID.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Right, ladies?
Absolutely.
I'm speaking to some of our Pony Patrol and census folks who are in the audience because they help us identify horses. And when they're all a bunch of plain bays, a nice little spotted pony would be good, right?
Yeah, so a lot of our island horses, you'll see similarities in them, and they look different from mainland horses, but you can also see, like locally, that the Cedar Island herd looks pretty distinct, the Shackleford herd looks pretty distinct, and Rachel Carson looks pretty distinct. So if a photographer comes to the area, like has happened before, and takes pictures and says, Shackleford Banks horses, and it gets made into this art, and it's like, no, those are Rachel Carson horses. We can tell the difference. And the shapes of their bodies, and sometimes in the shapes of their heads and the way their ears stand a little bit. So even though they do have those genetic similarities, there are some differences between the herds. I'll add to what Margaret said about the horses. All of our island horses on the east coast of North Carolina and up and down the eastern seaboard are more similar to each other than they are other horses. But there are also horses in Puerto Rico and some out in the Pryor Mountains that share some unique genetics with these horses. So I was real surprised by that. And even some of the Pasofinos in Puerto Rico who were probably mixed in with other horses that have some similar DNA. So there is a lot of science that's being conducted about the horses. So where do we want to go from history? Like maybe I'll go into the history of the Rachel Carson herd because it's a little bit different. So
Really?
Yeah, okay. I thought my voice was really projecting. Sorry if I yell at y'all in the front row. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Well, it's going to the internet. It's a microphone for the internet, but it's not to amplify in the room. So I'm talking to people online. Hey, y'all. So the Rachel Carson herd history, or the Care Island herd history, the most recent history is that in 1948, Dr. Luther Fulcher went over the Core Banks with a friend of his. I talked to Dr. Luther Fulcher's youngest daughter. I thought I might see her in the room today, but she didn't come today. Her name is Janet. She told me that it could have been Mr. Brown from Marshallburg that took his barge over there in 1948 to get the horses. I don't know that for sure, but that is from his daughter. And so the feds were, evicting some of the livestock off of the islands to use the islands for different purposes. And a lot of the locals had, sketchbooks where they would sketch the horses and say, well, this harem or this stallion and these mares are mine. And so Dr. Fulcher went and got less than a dozen of his horses that he had documented over time and put those horses on a barge. And they came down a little bit down Core Sound, then across Back Sound and over to Carrot Island. And he put them on the east end of Carrot Island. And he pretty much sequestered them to the east end across from the old Menhaden plant. And they ran fresh water line under Taylor's Creek over there to the horses and put the water in an old cast iron bathtub that is still over there in the bushes. You will never find it because it's so thick in vegetation. But I thought that was kind of interesting. So that's kind of the most recent history where we know they were put there. So those are Outer Banks horses that were put there. And by at least 1951, Dr. Fulcher had gotten some other horses in auction and mixed those horses in with the herd on Carrot Island and brought some from Carrot Island back to the mainland, swam on McCrofts with, a skiff coming across. And so, again, most recent history. By 1977, they were roaming free over the island, and a couple people tried to lay claim to them, but since the island was going into protection, the state was like, we can't have private ownership of these horses. If we inherit them, then we're going to, take them. Let's not argue over ownership. Let's just have the public, own the horses. And that's what ended up happening. So by 1985, they were owned and managed by the state, although we try to manage them as wild as possible. We do have to intervene on occasion. Now, some of you might know that near Carrot Island, there's an island called Horse Island. I mean, it's basically several acres of marsh. So there probably were horses there in the past, and the town of Beaufort had made an ordinance in the late 1800s, early 1900s that said you can't let your livestock or your marsh ponies run around downtown at night. So, I mean, that tells me before dredging that maybe some people were keeping some of their livestock out there, and maybe there were some that were related to island or Outer Banker horses, and maybe they weren't, but they probably were going over there and grazing at some point. But the real hard data that we have is Dr. Luther Fulcher in the late 1940s bringing them over.
Are you coming back to me?
Yeah, I guess.
We're waiting.
Okay. So I alluded earlier to the fact that there's a long history that documents the presence of what we now refer to as the Shackleford Banks horses. But at one time, yeah, they were Core Banks all the way up to Portsmouth, Ocracoke, and beyond. In fact, there was a reporter with National Geographic who came this way in the 30s. He traveled the whole length of the Outer Banks from the Virginia line, and he estimated several thousand, 5,000 approximately, wild horses along the whole length of the Outer Banks from the Virginia line all the way to Beaufort Inlet. And as you know, there wasn't always a separation between Shackleford Banks and Core Banks. That was in the 33 storm that created that inlet. And then like Paula alluded to, when the state taking over property, when the feds took over Core Banks, Shackleford Banks from the state, then there was the push to eradicate the livestock. There were cows, there were sheep. Some of y'all maybe remember that from years ago. A long, long time ago, there were cows and sheep and goats also on Shackleford. But all of that livestock got eradicated, but because of the popularity of the Shackleford Banks horses, the horses over there, and the public's feeling about the horses were left. But at some point, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, there were some concerns about the size of the herd, it becoming too large for Shackleford to support that many horses. There was concerns that they may starve, disease, that sort of thing. And so the Park Service implemented a plan, had public hearings, and then announced a plan to reduce the size of the herd. To much lower numbers. They were talking about a representative herd of 50 to 60 individuals. And a group of local people were very concerned about those plans. The first thought was that that was a pretext to getting rid of them altogether eventually. But even so, if the Park Service was sincere about keeping that number, local people were concerned that that wasn't sustainable, that there would be inbreeding and the problems associated with that if it was such a small herd. So this group formed a nonprofit, the Foundation for Shackleford Horses, in 1996, and set about to try to change the Park Service's mind about that plan and increase the numbers. And that's very small group of individuals got together. They called upon different researchers. They called upon the geneticists that Paula mentioned that talked about the relationship of these horses to some other herds in other parts of the country. They found out about this, potential link to Spanish stock. They also researched birth control and other things that might be available. They did some research into the possibility of equine infectious anemia, if it was found to be present in the herd, what should be done there. And last but not least, they prevailed upon politicians to get involved and to try to do something. And the late Walter B. Jones Jr., our former congressman, we were fortunate that, first of all, he had learned about these horses in North Carolina history. Any of you who grew up in this state know that we had North Carolina history in the 4th grade, and he learned about the horses then. But much more importantly, his wife, Joanne, was a horsewoman, and she bred and raised and showed Morgans, and she told Walter. She didn't ask Walter. She told Walter to get involved and to do something, and he did. And he introduced the Shackleford Bank Wild Horses Protection Act and got that through Congress, and that was a time when people actually listened to one another, and there was cooperation across the aisles, and it was a bipartisan effort. And then when it went to President Clinton's desk for signature, his chief of staff was, anybody remember? Erskine Bowles. That's right. Good old North Carolina boy. So he stuck it in front of him and said, "Please sign this, Mr. President," and the president did. And so that set us on this path of preserving and protecting these horses and working together to manage them, which we've done cooperatively. As Sue mentioned, she's been here from the get-go, and it's been quite a journey. We've learned a lot. So anyway, now I guess we can maybe talk about how we manage.
Yeah, ready for that? You want the mic back?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So for all of the herds that I can think of, they're managed hands-off as wild animals. Who's been to Ocracoke lately? Anybody? Those are not, I'm not including those in the wild herds because those are not managed as wild horses. I mean, they're penned, they get immunizations, they get their teeth, we call it floated when the sharp points are filed off. They get fed hay and grain if they need it. They get immunizations, they get their hooves trimmed, whatever they need, they get. So they were wild before the road came through and they needed to be penned for their own safety. But we don't classify them as wild horses anymore. Although historically they're genetically related. So there are some Shackleford horses up there that have bred, chosen to be bred with certain stallions. Happens that we gave them theirs. Well, we gave them They got stallions a different way. It's too complicated to go into today, but they have both Shackleford stallions and mares. They got a horse from Kerala at one point. So, these are all seen as close enough genetically that they can help each other out. But we're not talking about them today. But the rest of the herds are basically managed hands off. So if a horse on Shackleford, if you land on the west end of Shackleford this weekend, you will see a very thin chestnut mare, so a red mare with a light mane and tail and a white blaze, and she's 24 years old, and she is skeletal. I mean, she's very old. Now, we've had a mare live to 34, and I think that was your record too. So both herds have had horses live to 34, but that doesn't mean that they're all going to live to 34, right? So this mare's lived about as long as she's going to live, and one of these days she's not going to be with us anymore. But what are we going to do about it? I mean, if we were to, say, take her off and feed her grain, she'd be sick. I mean, mentally and physically, right? She would not be able to handle the stress of being penned and stabled and, all that, and given strange food. I mean, that would be a horrible thing to do for a horse. So we manage them hands off. Now, if a horse is down and injured, we'll handle things on a case-by-case basis. But if the horse is thin, if the horse is old, if the horse is limping, we want to know about it. So if you're out there and you see something, if you'd let us know where you were, drop a pin on your smartphone, take some pictures, let us know which other horses were there, who else is in the group. We're interested in knowing that because we monitor them, but we're not necessarily going to go, oh no, that old horse is old and thin, so we'll do something about it. So don't be surprised if we say thank you very much. We're thrilled to know that, but we're not going to do anything about it. We have a horse on the east end of Shackleford that we've been watching for probably a month and a half. She hurt herself somehow, we're not sure. She cut her hind leg, and Linda, one of our volunteers, is out there today and reports that she's walking even a little better today than she was last time she was seen. So that's what we do. We monitor, we watch them. So you all can help out with that. Just help other people know that we're not going to go out and, do something. What else do we need to talk about? This is cool. I just talked for a little bit and then I picked the microphone around.
Let me add on to what Sue said, and then we'll do a few questions just to make sure they don't stack up too far. So in terms of intervening, I feel like there's a little bit more intervention with the Rachel Carson herd because we're right there on the Beaufort waterfront and everybody sees everything. Some places on Shackleford can be a bit more remote where the horses aren't seen as often, but the Rachel Carson horses are pretty much seen every day by a number of, commercial businesses, people who live here, visitors. So sometimes we end up intervening a little bit more than we would like to. And we help each other out too. So when we have management challenges, we help each other out. Sue will come over to Rachel Carson. I'll go to Shackleford and we'll help each other out. One example is we had a stallion step through the lid of a stone crab pot. And he had the thing around his leg, and this happens every time I go out of town. I'm getting ready to walk down the aisle of a wedding for with a friend, and I'm calling Sue, and I'm like, we've got a horse with a crab pot on its leg. So anytime I go out of town, it seems to. So we have each other on call when we go out of town. But that is an example of one way in which we're going to intervene when it's caused by humans or trash. We've had, a Shackleford horse with a shovel handle on its foot, Rachel Carson horse with a double hook lure in its face. It ended up getting it out on its own, thankfully, but I was ready to tranquilize it and take that out. So if they get themselves into trouble and things that we have contributed to, a lot of times we'll intervene. But like Sue said, if it's just an old skinny horse, we're not going to euthanize it. If it's eating, it's drinking, it's walking around. Now, if it is showing extreme pain and extending its neck and showing some signs that it may be really uncomfortable, we might intervene. But if it's just trying to work something out, or if it's just old, we're not gonna do anything about that. So I just have a cheat sheet here. I ran a few stats this morning. So I thought that one of the questions might be, how long do they live? And so I looked in our records. If females or mares can make it through the first 6 years of life, which are really kind of critical, they'll live between 15 to 19 years. Now, those are mares that are not birth controlled. If they receive birth control, at least about 5 times in their lives, they live between 24 to 27 years. Although, we have the outlier at 34, but we also have some that are younger. That's why the range.
In other words, babies are hard.
Yes, babies are real hard. The males or stallions live between 13 and 17 years. So that is a shorter lifespan than the females, which non-birth control is 15 to 19. And if males can make it through the first 6 years of life, they live between 19 to 21 years. Now, is that kind of on par with the Shackleford horses? Yeah. Yeah. So the wildlife, isn't easy for these horses. There's one thing I do want to comment about grazing. We were talking about, is there enough forage out there for them? And the reserve, as I mentioned in the beginning, is a National Estuary Research Reserve site. So a lot of things we do, we want to know the science behind it before we do it. So in 1985, a PhD student went out there to the reserve and started doing what we call an activity budget on the horses. So what are they doing, when, and then how's that linked to their health? So the 1986 herd size was, 1985 to 1986, 44, and it exploded to 68 because there was no birth control at that time. In the summer, they were grazing 71% of the time. And in the winter, they were grazing 80%, 86%. So come up to 2012, when the herd size was 33, because we tried to keep it around 30, although it's low right now. So we're at the summer of 2012-ish. We've got a summer grazing of 32% versus 71% in the 80s. So if it is as high as 71%, they have to spend 71% of their lives grazing. There's not enough food. And back in the day, when the herd size went from 44 to 68, their body condition was not as good. The PhD student approached the state and said, your population is getting ready to collapse. And it did right after that. She predicted it in the next 3 to 4 years, but it happened 1 year after she said it. It collapsed. So we can do things to monitor the horses to understand their health indirectly. For the winter grazing in 85 was 86%, so that's almost all of your time. So what about your time to socialize, to groom yourself, to groom each other, to drink water, to rest? That is not the greatest welfare. And then the grazing in the winter between 85 and 2012 was, let's see, I said 86%, so it was 60% in 2012. So that went way down. So we know that our herd size is a lot more appropriate, and we have more vegetation than we've had out there in a very long time because we have a lot of marsh coming up. Even though we have some eroding, we have a lot that's recruiting to the area and a lot that's available for food. So we do monitor those things to make sure that our herd sizes are appropriate and plan to make sure that we're doing the best we can for them.
Yay. So should we do some questions?
We can, or you can talk about what we're all looking at, the same kinds of issues on Shackleford.
So yeah, let me do that. I'll try to make it succinct. We're definitely doing the same things, and sometimes we actually compare statistics. We have an informal document talking about acres per horse on Shackleford, on Rachel Carson Reserve, and we even added Cedar Island just because we know that herd pretty well and they have a lot of marsh too. So we're doing things like that, which help us a lot trying to figure out, are we okay? Should we be doing something different? And one of the things that we can do is birth control. That we would like not to remove horses. Obviously, if we need to remove horses, we need to remove horses, but we would rather they are born and grow up wild and live in the wild all their lives. I mean, that's kind of the goal. So we've done roundups on Shackleford in the past, and then after the roundups, we did some removal, because we still needed to get the population down a little bit. But yeah, with judicious birth control, we should be able to get the herd to be at a reasonable size. But the birth control, it's not 100%. It's basically we're shooting darts at the horses, so things can happen, between the time you put the medicine in the dart and then it actually injects into the horse. Things like wind and, horses moving and horses' tail hair and, all sorts of stuff happens. But, and then there's their antibody response, whether they actually mount an antibody response. There's a mare that's pregnant, looks pregnant. She's huge on Shackleford right now. That was birth controlled the last 2 years in a row. So she should not be pregnant. But, whatever. I know the dart got in her 2 different times, actually 3, but, whatever. They're biological creatures. So we do some, that's the only really intervention we can do. And it's delayed. So I birth controlled, actually you birth controlled a bay mare on the east end of Shackleford. Paula went out with us one day because we needed some extra help, and it's really convenient to have friends in the right places. And birth controlled a bay mare. Well, she just had a foal, probably within the last couple days. Linda just found the foal today, and it's like a couple of days old. Are we surprised? No. She was pregnant with that foal 11 months ago. So she only got the birth control drug in the spring, this past spring. And so her antibodies would go up, which would prevent her from conceiving. It doesn't affect the foal that she's already carrying. So she shouldn't conceive this year, so she shouldn't foal next year. So there's always a delay. So it's not like you can say, okay, I don't want anybody to foal this year, so I'm going to stop them all from foaling this year. I'm going to stop half of them from foaling this year. It's not that simple. But it does work. It's been shown to work. So.
And it's a vaccine. Sue
Yes.
was talking about antibodies, so it's not like a hormonal birth control that's commonly used in humans. So it's not going to be urinated back into our surface waters or anything. So it's a vaccine, just like it has an adjuvant, just like a vaccine would have for humans, and it stimulates their immune system.
Which is really kind of cool because you don't mess with their hormones. They think they're ovulating and they think they're coming in season, and the stallions think they're coming in season too. Everything's just normal. They just don't conceive, which is a good thing. All right. I hate to do this, but we're going to do it. Let's ask for a handful. What I hate is that we're just going to ask for a handful of questions so then we can get back. So if you don't get recognized, hold your question and we'll answer more later. Okay, you've got it.
Susan here. Do y'all still tell me about Dan Rubenstein's studies of the Shackleford horses? Is it 50 years? Dan Rubenstein.
Yeah, so Dan retired a couple years ago, so he's not actively researching. He was a professor of conservation biology at Princeton, and he did his PhD on Shackleford with the horses and helped us. Well, he researched kind of before we got started, and then he helped us when we started identifying the horses and all. He was instrumental in passing on some of his techniques and information, and also.
Still valid?
Well, yes, whatever he saw when he saw it, I believe that he saw it. There's one study that I have not seen the same thing, which doesn't mean that he didn't see it, but he saw territorial behavior in the horses, and the definition, this is all scientific definitions. It's not like maybe what you would assume. Territorial in equids, so zebras and donkeys and horses, involves the male basically keeping an area, and he will breed the females that come into his area, and he will push other males away from his area. So he saw territorial behavior, which I believe he saw the horses in harems, more or less permanently in harems. In other words, the mares just weren't roaming at will. The stallion kept them for a period of time. Since I've been here, I've not seen males defending an area. They'll defend where they are. If they're at a water hole, they're not going to let somebody else come in and use that water hole while their mares are standing there. But then when they're done drinking, they'll leave, and our horses have home ranges, which overlap at water holes and resources that they particularly like a particular marsh that they all might need to graze in. So
And I just
that,
found
but
Walt Hoffman's thesis from 1982.
cool. I can't remember it.
German.
Yeah, he was at Duke, right?
He was studying at Duke, but the degree is from Tübingen.
Right.
Oh, okay.
One of the things that Dan did for us that's particularly valuable, and we rely on it to this day, is the record keeping. He established who the horses were, how they were related, the family trees, if you will, and the quote unquote naming system, which we still utilize to this day. We do not publicly talk about the names of the horses. We don't assign them names that we announce publicly. And the reason for that is that they are wild, and we want people to treat them as wild and not consider them pets, not go over there looking for Annie or Laurie or whoever, or want their picture taken with Spock, And so we don't publicly call them by name, but he and his students set up that system, and it gives us a history going back, as Sue says, long before we were involved. He started coming, and they started this system and kept these records so that we know what families existed, what lineages existed, which ones have gone away, we've lost for various reasons, and which ones you can still trace. So it was invaluable for that reason also. We're grateful that he did that. And in fact, one of his students in particular, one of his graduate assistants in particular, has continued to stay involved and continued to research the horses over the years. So there's a tremendous history there with him and some others. Gus Cothran, who does the genetics, he's at Texas A&M, and he's recently retired as well. He's someone else who's been involved in these horses for a long, long time and maintained the genetics. Phil Spanenberg, who was at Virginia Tech and also associated with the Livestock Conservancy. He studied these horses for a number of years. We had a professor at University of Kentucky who did EIA studies in horses, and he was particularly interested in what was going on with these horses in the EIA field, and even the horses that the foundation took when they were removed from Shackleford and taken to our quarantine site down east. He continued to come to the quarantine site and study those horses. So this is a well-studied group of horses, and it's been invaluable research, not only about them and banker horses, but arguably, equines around the world. So a lot of people pay attention to these little guys. It's really kind of remarkable.
I should just say that you know what EIA is.
I'm sorry.
We're awful using acronyms, and the government's particularly bad. Yeah, equine infectious anemia. So equine, it's a horse disease. People can't get it, dogs can't get it. Infectious, it passes from horse to horse. Anemia, it's a blood disease. So that's what a number of Shackleford horses had, and some of them were euthanized, which is the law in all 50 states in the United States. Unless you are in a state, luckily we are, North Carolina, Florida, there's a handful of states that if you have EIA positive horses and you have an appropriate quarantine site that's approved by the state veterinarians, you can keep them there because they can be quarantined a distance from other horses and keep other horses from getting it. But there's no vaccine, there's no cure, and it's a really nasty death. So it's not something that you would want to take an EIA positive horse to a competition, a trail ride or whatever, and expose other horses to it. So that's what EIA is. All right, another question. Yes.
When you remove a horse, you said what do you do with them?
You get that one.
So the legislation provides that any horses removed from Shackleford become the property of the foundation. And that was originally tied to the whole issue of EIA positives. And the original group of board members wanted to try to provide a place where those horses could be quarantined, and did secure a site and have it approved by the state, and they were able to house those horses until they died. We just lost our last one a year ago at age 38. But anyway, so that was provided for in the legislation, that horses removed. In some cases, horses that are removed, we have been able to take other places, like, for example, Cedar Island, and allow the herd there to be refurbished or revitalized. We have, as Sue mentioned, a couple have gone to Ocracoke. And the majority of them have come to the foundation, to our rescue and adoption farm, and been adopted out to the public after an appropriate amount of time when they've been acclimated to domestic life. So they've been taught how to eat, how to function, how to lead, how to stand or a farrier and a vet, that sort of thing. And then we adopt them out to applicants to appropriate homes. And with the provision that if necessary, they come back to us if anything happens. And we have a couple of geriatric residents there right now as a result of things like that. Life changes. So, yeah, that's what happens to them.
First, I would like to say thank you so much. We appreciate you three so much.
Oh, well, you're going to get your shout out in a minute. Just wait.
Wow, big volunteers, I'm gonna tell you that. But since it is so brutally hot there when the volunteers are there in the summer, you know how we complain about that. We're never there in the winter when it's brutally cold. So this is my question to you. I know that maybe temperature doesn't have as much to do with when they die, but do you find more die in the summer than they do in the winter when it's so cold or so hot? Or does that not have any effect on it? Nope, they just drop when they drop.
Yeah, I'll answer for Shackleford and then hand this to Paula. I can't say that they're more likely to die in the summer or the winter or during a storm. I mean, people worry about them in hurricanes, and we have, before I got here, we lost some horses in a hurricane, and certainly Cedar Island lost horses in Dorian, right?
Dorian.
Yeah, Dorian. So it's always possible, but no, it seems like they'll make it through like the worst of the coldest of the winter, and then they'll die. So I don't know. We unfortunately, even as many horses as we have and as many records as we have, we don't seem to have any trends as far as that's concerned. But yeah.
I feel like at the reserve, we're kind of on the verge of a trend. So they'll make it through the winter, and then in March, that's when most of our deaths will happen. Now, we'll have other deaths that will happen throughout the year, but if you look at data throughout time, as March is the peak. For some reason, like they make it, and then there are a couple warm days, and yeah, it's really, really, really interesting.
Keep it. Let's see what the next question is.
Do you do blood tests for the EIA, or how do you diagnose it?
Mm-hmm. Well, both of our herds right now, we're not testing the herds unless we are going to move an animal off the island, or if we do move it, have to quarantine it until we get that result back. But right now we're not testing either herd, and we don't see any problems. Shackleford did testing for a long time to eradicate it from the herd. Rachel Carson was also doing that same testing, but a couple of the horses that were tranquilized to be tested ran in the water and drowned. As you can imagine, that was a pretty traumatic thing for the citizens of Beaufort, and so the testing stopped at that point.
Don't the herds swim back and forth from island to island?
Well, they swim back and forth within their areas. So like if you are on the way to Cape Lookout, to the lighthouse area, you'll see our horses out on the Marsh Islands, and they'll go back and forth, between the Marsh Islands. And on Rachel Carson, they'll move, between between Bird Shoal and Town Marsh. But no, we've never had them swim of their own free will between. In Hurricane Isabel, 3 of the Rachel Carson horses came over to visit us in Shackleford, and I came around the corner and I went, I recognize you, but you don't belong here. They were standing just as close to the edge of the island, yes, as they possibly could without getting their feet wet. And there's a little black stallion of ours that really wanted those 2 mares, and they were like, they would have nothing to do with him. So we sedated them and took them back.
Was it 15 or 20 years ago? I saw some horses running over the highway near Radio Island.
Yeah.
Oh, you get that one.
Yeah, so it was well over 20 years ago, but that is, yes, so a bachelor band, so that is exactly what it sounds like, a band of young male horses. When the herd size was a lot greater than it is now, they swam Bulkhead Channel from like the west end of the reserve over to Radio Island and went out to the causeway and were grazing. Yeah, and I can't remember exactly. I don't think they had to bring the cowboys in for that, but they were kind of local people, and the reserve managers kind of like herded them back onto Radio Island. Then once they got on Radio Island, they actually swam themselves back to the reserve. But if there is enough forage somewhere for the horses, they're not going to really try to go anywhere. But yeah, that was an issue a few times in the past. Yeah, you did see that.
So they prefer food over women.
Well,
Or women looking
sure.
for women and
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking they were looking for food, but they could have been looking for women as well. I'm trying to give them a little more credit.
You mentioned about the foraging, but what about, and you also mentioned where Dr. Fulcher had the water piped over to Carib Island, but what about water sources now?
Mhm.
What are they-
That's a good question.
Yep. So they're actually doing research over there on the reserve. It's digging fresh water. They will drink pooled fresh water, but they won't trust it for a long time. So if there's like a dredge spoil cell that has some room for rainwater in it, they will not drink out of it until they trust that water is there and it's clean. So sometimes when the Army Corps comes and deposits sediment and rainwater gathers in there, they won't drink it like the first day. I mean, they have to get used to it. So they dig mostly. And the thought is that it's mostly fresh water, but we're learning differently across the Sound.
7 parts per thousand?
Yeah, I'm not sure anything's 7 parts per thousand, but like 5 or maybe 6. So when I first got here, I was told that these horses drink brackish water, that they're physiologically changed to be able to drink brackish water. And that would be like saying, okay, so Sue and her family is physiologically changed that they can drink Gatorade all the time and they'll be fine. I'm a human. I mean, even if I have generations of offspring, I'm not sure any of them are going to be able to drink Gatorade all the time and survive. Just it's possible. So I have a little handheld salinity meter, and when I first got here, I would wait until the horses were done drinking, and I'd go put the eyedropper in and test the water. And at one point, I was sitting in a little opening in the shrubs, and there were 2 digs. So the fresh water is under the island, and the horses dig down to get it. There were 2 dug out holes, and I was sitting closer to one than the other, and the stallion comes in and he looks at me, and he goes to the hole that's further away from me and takes a drink. And I'm like, I was probably in his way, right? So when he left, I tested both of the holes, and the one that he was at was slightly less saline than the one that I was sitting near. So they know they can choose the difference. But we're now finding that they may be drinking more brackish water than we thought, and we'll have to go back through our old records. I'm not sure if we weren't testing. It's possible that we weren't testing enough sites to actually get the full picture. but it's also fairly apparent, the research isn't in yet, but that the water has more salt influence than it has in the past. And we know that, for example, on Shackleford, there are about 4 or 5 places in the middle of the island where the horses have never dug or drank from while I've been here, so 25 years worth, that they're now digging in and drinking from. So I believe from that the water is more available to them in those places than it was before. It wasn't worth it for them to dig there before, but now it is. So they're digging there, and it seems to be really fresh water. So we know that the water under the island is changing some, that there are changes, and we've actually got a hydrology study going with ECU, and they have a number of wells. They're little PVC pipes about an inch in diameter, so it's not like a well like we would think of, but they're little test wells in and around water sources in 3 different places in the island, and they're monitoring 24 hours a day for like salinity and temperature and all of those water level. And as they're going through their data, we'll have more information. We also have wildlife cameras out and some students who have been really good at going through the pictures, and we're going to try to determine like when the water was so many parts per thousand, how many horses came and how long did they stay, because the camera will take pictures every so often as long as there's movement. You have to throw out all the pictures of waving grass. And then, if the water was more salty, were the horses there for less time? So I've personally seen water holes, and the horses will come, and it's a hole that we know they're using, and they'll come across and they'll drink like for a few minutes and then just walk on. And I can't imagine that their thirst is taken care of at that time. But then I find from the data that it's more salty. I mean, it's not brackish yet, but it's on the more salty end, area of the spectrum. So what we're probably finding is they're making choices where they drink based on the salinity, but the data is really going to help us. So stay tuned. Yes.
I saw them digging for water about less than a block away from the actual shore, facing.
Are you talking Rachel Carson Reserve?
White House, Shackleford.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So it's less than a block distance from the shore. And I wondered if it was very common that they dug holes that close to the water. I actually, did a painting of that I saw, and I have a copy of it downstairs. But I was surprised that it was that close to the shore.
Yeah. It just depends on where the water's available to the surface. It really does. There's a couple actual pond-like water holes that are within, 15, 20 feet of the sound side. Actually, one of them's gone. It has been gone for several years, but it's really close to the sound, which means when the tide's high, it's going to flood, but then it will clean itself and it'll come back to freshness if it doesn't grow a bunch of algae and stuff in the meantime. So yeah, it depends. And then there are several water sources in the intertidal zone. So in the wet sand on the sound side. So when the tide is high, the horses can't get to the water because it's covered in salt water. But when the tide falls, there will be little seeps where the fresh water comes up, and you notice that there's lots of little places where there's water, and we look at it and go, oh, there's water all over, but they're going to a specific place and drinking there. So yeah, if you waited till they were gone and stuck an eyedropper in there, you could test it and it would be fresh.
So let's stop. Oh, you had a question, Ms. Neva, and then we'll go to move on. Go ahead.
Did you all work with Samantha Brown, Places to Love, when she came? That couldn't have been done without y'all, because it started with public TV. It started with the Shackleford Horses. Wonderfully done program.
They did a good job. Who saw that? Who saw Samantha Brown, Places to Love? There. So you can still see it. It's on PBS, right? The
Yeah.
PBS app. Just look for the previous what, editions. That's not the right word. The previous programs, episodes. Thank you. Yes, and yeah, and she was a joy to work with, and we went out and walked around, and yeah, so that was fun. Also, who saw the Americas? The very first. You don't even have to watch the whole. Yeah, you don't even have to watch the whole program. But the very first 5 minutes is the Shackleford Horses, and yeah, Monty had a lot to do with that too. So yeah.
Monty was their escort.
Yes, for 3 years.
He was their Uber.
Right. Yeah. Well, an advisor too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. That was really well done. All right. You want to go?
We kind of have a feeling, those that work out there and do things, that we might have an increase of traffic because of that show. You guys sense
Yeah.
that at all?
Yeah.
They're
It's
gonna
good
become
and
a
bad.
Destination point now, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
I wondered if they noticed other than.
So that's a good segue, though, for kind of where I wanted to go next, and that is human interference, how we are changing their lives out there, and what we can do to protect them, and it all ties into these things that we've talked about already. Paula mentioned their activity budget and how they spend their time, and we've talked about water and how important that is. And the increase in visitation has potentially impacted all of those things. And even to the extent that the territoriality, if you will, that Dan observed back in the day when there were very few people over there, and now there are many more. And so maybe that's had an impact on their social structure and family structure and territories. We don't know for sure. But we always talk, we say it in, we tend to say it in the negative to people, which is please don't interfere with the horses. And when we were doing the new rack cards, which we have today, we're so excited.
They're out there.
Thanks to the state for printing those for us and making those available. But new updated rack cards. We had a little bit of a discussion about the word interference. Because a lot of times when you say to the public, please don't interfere with the horses, people are immediately going to say, oh, I'm not interfering. I'm not interfering. And that's because they don't understand the concept of interference. And interference is not walking up to the horse and petting it or trying to get on it or offering it something to eat. I mean, yes, that's all interference, but that's not, tell us ladies, that's not what we most commonly see. Instead, what we see is people trying to get a better look, trying to get a little closer, trying to get a little bit better picture, and in the process, the horses stop what they're doing and they move on. And so they might not get as much time at that watering hole or the seat as they would ordinarily spend there because the stallion's not comfortable with the proximity of the visitors. Or the foal may not get to rest as long because mother gathers it up and takes it out of the area. The one I worry about all the time is the stallion who's waiting for the opportunity to take the mare. And he's just over the dune. And so that little family with the kids and everybody, and they're trying to get the picture, they are oblivious to the fact that there's a stallion over there. But the stallion, the herd stallion knows, the harem stallion knows there's another one over there. And so the intruder sees an opportunity while the stallion is distracted by the family and the kids and the dog. And he swoops in and gathers up a mare, and she may have a foal. And he takes her off, and the foal gets left behind, or the foal gets trampled. Mama and baby get separated. When she's finally able to come back, get away from that stallion and come back for her baby's not there anymore. That's worst case scenario. So again, all those people who would say, I'm not interfering, you are. You are. And we need to always be mindful of that if we are altering their behavior, if we're causing them to stop, we say it all the time, if you're more than 50 feet away, but they stop what they're doing, you're still too close. And you need to back up so that they can continue on with, because life over there is so hard, as these statistics demonstrate. Life is short, and they have to do a lot, and especially the foals are so fragile in those early days. They're having to learn how to nurse, how to stand, how to run, how to keep up with mama, how to keep up with the herd movements in this heat. And then there are people. It's a lot. It's a lot. So that's kind of the thing that we try to focus on is educating the public about what you can do. You can still enjoy them. And one of the things I encourage you, if you've not done it, to go with Sue over there for one of her horse sense and survival tours, because you will get to see the horses do things that if you get too close, they won't do. But if you're at a reasonable distance and she's pointing out things to you about their behaviors, they're grooming one another, the way the mare is teaching the foal, hey, not going to do that. Don't be a pest, The way the bachelors sort of posture and play with one another as they're learning how to eventually get themselves a mare. You can see all those kinds of things if you're from a distance. And that is so much cooler, I promise you, than a selfie. So that's,
yeah. Yep. Margaret did a good job with that. That's the way it is. And when we're out there, we all risk interfering with them, even though we don't mean to. And one of the challenges is if you're out there and you're an appropriate distance away, but then somebody just got off the ferry or off a private boat and they're coming from the opposite direction, you're about to get those horses squeezed in between. And it's not like I'm there with a group. Some of us take groups out and we can say, hey, there's another group coming, let's move. We'll just move over there. We can still see them just as well from over there, and that way the horses won't feel squeezed. But when you get, members of the public that don't know each other and all, you're less likely to see that. So just thank you for spreading the word to people that you talk to in a restaurant or walking down the street or whatever. Thank you for spreading the word when you're out on the islands, and let people know that it's their home. And as Margaret said, life's difficult. Life's really difficult, and then the flies come out and the mosquitoes. So
let's talk about signs real quickly. That's a common question I get online. I'm for better or worse, I'm the social media person for the foundation. And one of the common comments I get is signs. Why aren't there more signs? You need to put up signs. Signs. Really? Do you all want to see signs on Shackleford Banks? You did a pop-up for Memorial Day weekend, and I applaud you for that. Did you gather them back down?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, we took them back down.
Okay.
Yeah, the signs
Okay.
aren't always, they only get a certain number of people. They're not effective all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. If you've been over to Wade Shore on a weekend, you see what it looks like. It looks like East Carolina football game, except it's on the water. The boat's lined up. Well, somebody gets off their boat, walks straight to the beach. If the sign is 25 yards down the beach, they're never going to see that sign. So we certainly aren't going to line that beach, even if the Park Service could, no offense, get its act together to approve a bunch of signs. Hey, I can say that about them. I used to be their lawyer. Okay, so, but no, I mean, seriously, if you do what it took to get a sign through the National Park Service, you would understand why we don't even go there. But assuming we did, still, would it do that much good? We don't want to litter Shackleford with signs. So that's the answer to signs.
yeah, she's absolutely right about the signs. Last time I tried to get a sign for something, it was like pulling teeth. It had to, the dimensions had to be right, and it had to be the exact right color paint. Not just any brown would do. It has to be like, I don't know, Park Service brown or whatever. And the type has to be the right type. The font has to be correct, and the edges have to be correct. And I just want sign, but no. Go.
I'll speak to science.
So I wanted to point out that Margaret just described one of her worst nightmares, which actually happened on Rachel Carson about a month ago, the foal getting separated from the mom. And that was a result of the mom giving birth and being in post-foal estrus or heat. And the stallion was very reactive, and he was reacted to boats that were coming to the shore even. And he would move his mare or breeder and then try to move her with no regard to the foal. And so a lot of people were coming close to that group of horses, and the stallion took the mare across a creek, and the baby didn't have time to react and follow. And so the baby got stuck on the other side of the creek and wouldn't swim by itself because it was so young. It needed mom or some other horse to lead it across the water. And so I ended up right before dark having to put that little foal in my skiff, take it across the creek, and like a quarter mile down the reserve, reunited with its mom. But we don't want to be intervening like that, and that's kind of the worst case scenario, and it happened. And so we need people to understand that even pulling up, if you're at a perpendicular angle to the shoreline and you're coming straight at a group of horses with your boat, they're going to be more vigilant. They're going to have vigilant behaviors, maybe just standing up and putting their ears forward. But in this case, the stallion was stimulated by that the post-estrus heat, and so he was very reactive. So things like that can happen, even if you're in your boat and you think, oh, it's okay. It's not okay.
The other common comment, question, demand that I see on social media is folks saying, you should close Shackleford. Just don't let people go over there anymore. It needs to be closed. People need to be banned. Or, the more moderate view is, well, we'll ban it during foaling season. As if there is such a thing, right? We'll ban it during foaling season. I mean, arguably there is a time of year when they typically foal, but we've had them very early.
January.
And we've had them very late, like the day after a hurricane. So that's really not realistic. But what I will say personally, and on behalf of the foundation, because I know all my board members feel this way, we will never advocate for Shackleford being closed. Again, assuming the Park Service could all sing off the same song sheet and agree about that. No, we would never advocate for that. It is public land, and it is for the benefit of all the American people, and always will be. But even more so, as far as I'm concerned, from a personal perspective and a family perspective, is Shackleford is sacred ground, as far as I'm concerned. And there are people in Carteret County whose families lived there, came from there, born, lived, and are buried there. And so it should always be open. And then the last thing I'll say about that idea is, since when did we start letting the assholes, excuse my language, tell us what we can and can't do? Why do we let the worst actors deprive us of what we want to be able to do? No, there should be consequences, and there are. We have had people who have been, and both these ladies can attest, in both parks, that people have been cited for getting too close, for harassing, for interfering with the horses. And in the case of Shackleford Banks, that means you get to go to the federal magistrate in New Bern and spend the day with them. Boy, what a way to ruin the 4th of July, right? Because guess what? The federal magistrate is not going to be there until after the 4th of July. So you're going to be waiting your turn. Anyway, there are things that we can do to prevent those behaviors, and so we would never advocate closing Shackleford.
And you all can help by spreading the word. I mean, just, you've been in in the checkout line at your favorite store and somebody says something, oh, we're going out to Shackleford, we're gonna party, or I mean, just you have lots of opportunities to share what you know. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
And I want to acknowledge what a lot of you in this room have already done. I go on social media and the locals pile on people with their knowledge about horses. Y'all know a lot and you're very aware of how to protect the horses, and I've been really impressed. The locals are some of the horses' best advocates, and we acknowledge that, and we know that, and we appreciate every time one of you talks to somebody about the horses and educates them. And I'm just so impressed when I look on social media and somebody says something about a horse or posts an inappropriate a picture with somebody very close to them, and people just pile on hundreds of comments. I'm like, wow, yeah.
And that didn't used to be the case.
Yeah.
It's taken a while to get there and to raise public awareness, because it didn't used to be the case, but now it is, and that's great. But speaking of advocates, I know that we have some of you here in this room, and I want to recognize you. Volunteers, raise your hand, please. These folks are the real heroes. We came together pre-COVID, pre-lockdown, and conceived of a plan to have volunteers over there who would talk to the public and help spread the word, because our research demonstrated that one-on-one interaction is the best way to educate folks. You don't need signs, you don't need brochures, you need one-on-one interactions. And so we started the idea of that program back then, and we had to park it for a while because of COVID, but came back, and this is our third season. We have more volunteers than ever. They are working tirelessly, and I know that we started out the season kind of bumpy with the foal at Rachel Carson and then the 2 at Shackleford, but you guys have been rock stars, and we're so grateful for you. And I don't know what we would do without you. It really has been a game changer. You want to talk about a difference in people's opinions. Having the Pony Patrol folks and our other volunteers in the park out there has made a huge difference. And we had a group that actually held vigil over a little foal born on the west end of Shackleford, in the vicinity of where a lot of the ferry visitors go. And these folks got together, took it upon themselves. We didn't ask them to do this, took it upon themselves to watch that baby, to intercept visitors, to tell them how to safely observe, but also keep eyes on that baby. And the reports the reports have just been so gratifying. When I would get text messages about the baby, I would immediately share it with all of my board, and they were just like, wow, this is incredible to have this kind of group effort out there. So thank you guys.
Well, Marco hid in the bush. I was coming through and saw something in the bush, and I'm like, and it was her.
So before I forget, there are rat cards out there on the shelf before you turn right and go downstairs. I just brought a handful of these. These are the site bulletin for the park, and they have a really cool map on the back, which includes the Rachel Carson Reserve area. It doesn't designate it, but it's helpful. And then we also have what we call our green stripe brochure, which is our horse brochure, with the foundation brochure nested inside. So feel free to help yourself to anything like that. And we've based our talk loosely on the frequently asked questions that we did in 2017. So it's been around for a long time, but the three of us basically got together and came up with what we thought were the most frequently asked questions and answered them on paper. And it's on our website. It's on our website. I assume it's on your website.
It is.
Okay. So you can get it on either website. But there's printed copies out there if you have somebody that needs a printed copy. So feel free to share.
And if you want to know how to get involved with Pony Patrol next season, talk to these folks.
Yes, talk to anybody who raised their hands earlier. Yeah, so should we do questions again? If anybody wants to slip out, please do not feel badly. It's warm, and we understand that you've been sitting here for a little more than an hour, so feel free to leave, but we'll do more questions as long as you all have them.
Yeah, what is the current count for the 2 locations, and also what do you try to manage those at?
So we're around 20 right now. We want to be between 28 and 32.
Okay.
We had a number of unexpected deaths happen, and any small population of anything, any small wildlife population is very vulnerable to collapsing or reducing. And so, after Hurricane Florence, we had our horse step in a hole that a sailboat made on the reserve and broke his leg in half. Some unexpected things, and some unviable young horses. And so we're down at 20, and we're haven't birth controlled in a long time, and so we're looking forward to having that herd come back up.
It was that low.
But hopefully we'll be rebounding.
Yep.
And so we're at 111 because we count the foal that we just found today. And there's one more mare that looks like she's going to foal. And I think we'd like to be a little lower than that. We don't really have like a goal. The legislation says 120 to 130.
As a target.
As a target, yeah. But it doesn't require us to be there, which is good because we lost almost a mile of the West End when it started eroding a few years ago and just kept right on eroding to its historic level's the wrong word. It's historic place. So yeah, it's really the islands change. I mean, barrier islands just change a lot. So yeah, the population needs to be somewhat flexible too. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah, you bet. Yeah, go.
So how many generations do you have documented?
Whoa, how many generations? So probably six or 8.
Let's see, Dan started in 78, right?
That's true.
So
Yeah.
What is a
that's-
generation?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
What do you consider a generation in these horses?
I don't know. We got to define that, don't we?
Well,
Yeah.
thanks to Monty, we do.
Maybe you can get to work on that.
I just
Sounds like
before.
a winter project for you.
You need to take that on.
Yeah, I was just messing with the database before I left to come here today. So, yeah, I'd probably go with less than that, maybe 15. But I don't know. I mean, we got to figure that out. But I'm thinking of all the I don't know. I'd say like 6 or 7 or 8, something like that. But get back to us and we'll define generation and figure that out. But yeah, we've got. We have a number of horses. Well, the foal that was born on the West End, I just went back to its grandparents just to remember who was. I know who was related to who, but I had forgotten who was aunts and uncles and who was siblings and who the grandparents were, and I had to go back and look. So, that's, if you consider that's 3 generations, I didn't go back any further than that, but, and that just takes it to horses that, that I probably saw
That's
born.
kind of my question, Sue, is that, okay, we have the foal born in the last day or 2. We know who his mother is.
Right,
Yep.
right,
Its mother.
right, its mother.
Its mother. So I kind of
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
consider that a generation. if
Well, we
you
know
will.
his father
Yeah.
too. We know the
Yeah.
fathers too.
Yeah,
Are
but
we
yeah.
positive who the father is?
Well, we will when the DNA results come back.
Yeah.
So what happens is, unfortunately, it doesn't tell us how the horses got here. It just tells us how they're related to each other. So if you have human families, it's mom and dad and they have kids, and the kids are usually mom and dad's kids, right? But usually. But with horses, and then you have blended families, which I won't go into. But with horses, the female, you have to look at which male she was with when she conceived, but then you have to look at the other males in the area that she may have had, access to, or they had access to her. So it's not always who you would expect. That's where we start. We go, genetically try this one first and then try these, and then you go with distance and, try these. They were further away, but, they could have.
But there's always a traveling man in there somewhere.
So we basically, we normally collect, now we're collecting dung because we always go with least invasive. So now we collect dung. So we wait until they poop and collect it, put it in a little vial, stick it in the freezer, and then when we've got all the samples from the summer, we send them off to Idaho and they get analyzed over the winter, and then they come back. And sometimes it's like easy, it was this one, it clearly matched, or sometimes it's like, well, it could have been either of these, and our program says it was probably this one, and I look at the data and go, yeah, so those guys are full brothers, so it makes sense that they, either of them could be the dad. But yes, she was only sighted with this brother, which doesn't mean that she wasn't with the other brother, because they live fairly near each other, but, we do the best we can. So before that, back when we were rounding up, we did blood testing, and with the foals that we took off this spring, spring, early summer, I just pulled hair, mane or tail hair, and sent it off, and that goes to Texas A&M. And that's pretty fast. That's whenever Aretas has another batch going through the machine, that he has a couple spaces open for it, so he can give us results fairly quickly. So we'll eventually know who the moms and dads are. But yeah, even if you just go with the females and look back generations, yeah, we probably know at least 6 or 8 generations.
So nobody's asked about those babies. I'm surprised. I figured that would be the first question. They're doing great. In fact, I reached out to the vet this morning because I anticipated we get questions about them. If people are wondering what I'm talking about, if you were gone Memorial Day weekend or whatever, we had a foal that we had to remove Memorial Day weekend. He was found without his mother. And then 10 days-ish later, had a second one that was separated from its mother. And they are both at our vets still up in Institute, North Carolina, which is, anybody know where Institute is? North of Kinston. And they have been there ever since. The first foal that we took off, he had never nursed and had never stood, that we could tell. And he immediately imprinted on the vet and her staff and her corgi, and he does not identify as horse, and he is doing great. His name is Surrey, because we were, even though he was not with his mother, we were through DNA able to determine who his mother was, and Sue has since seen her, and she is fine, so it was not the result of any kind of anything catastrophic happening with her. But he's doing well. He is now spending more time with equines. He's been paired with a mini donkey who is very protective of him. And he has also, in just the last week, been turned back in with the other one, whose name is Davy. And they are together and pretending to horse, but not really playing. Davy, as it turned out, ended up with a nurse mare that we had been given the use of for Surrey. Surrey had no interest in the nurse mare. And so, as it turned out, the nurse mare was then available for Davy. And she is a wonderful mother and very protective of him. And in fact, the reunion between Davy and Surrey was somewhat delayed because Evie, the surrogate mom, was a little bit reluctant to have Surrey play with Davy, but now they are together. They're doing well. They're incredibly healthy. Our vet said that Surrey was as close to death as any newborn foal that she's ever treated, handled, cared for. It's really miraculous, given that he had not nursed, had not received any colostrum, but She was able to save him. Davy is as shut down as Surrey was physically. Davy was shut down emotionally because he had been with his mother for 10 days and lived as a wild horse, and then was separated from her. And so he spent the first few days in the stall with his little, I can't even say it, with his little face pressed into the corner. Not knowing what to do, not understanding where he was. But so our being able to give him a nurse pair made all the difference. I mean, the light came back into his eyes immediately. So we feel really fortunate with both of them that they're doing so well. So thank you for asking.
Glad somebody asked.
And Paula had one that she had to
That's
do
right.
the same
You did the
thing
same.
with.
Yeah, we're
You wanna
getting
tell us
we're
about
getting really good
Pearl?
at this. Not that we want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it was September. Now I can't even remember when it was because it was 2 years in a row. But we have a mare who doesn't produce colostrum or help nutritious enough milk, and so 2 of her foals 2 years in a row we had to remove. And so the second one, so the one from last year, 2024. It survived. It got treated at the vet school, and it went to an equine sanctuary, a very bougie one at that, a very great one. And they're teaching it's how to be a horse. And so at about a year of age, they're going to adopt it out. Honestly, I think I wouldn't be surprised if they kept it because it's kind of a special member of their farm. They've never had a banker horse before. But she's doing great. Little Pearl's doing fantastic. So
I just want to say that we're not removing horses because we want to or because they're so cute or anything like that. We're basically, when we look at them and go, this horse is gonna die, I can either sit here and let it die or I can take it off. That's when we're making that decision to take them off. Emergencies. Yeah. And also, you're not going to get your hands on them unless they're, in pretty bad shape. So, anyway. Other questions?
This is a real specific one.
Yes.
So the new girl on the West End.
Yes.
Okay. Some of us have noticed, and I noticed from that first day, that there's a dark mare.
Yes, the black mare.
It starts with an H.
Okay. Yep. The black mare. Yeah.
Who, the day she was born, I got to see her mom take her to the harem and introduce her. Well, from across the way, high atop this dune, came this mare.
The black mare. Yeah.
And she was looking like, what is going on here? Ran down, checked out the foal, and from that time has been hanging out with the mother and the foal. So we call her a crazy aunt.
Makes sense.
I wonder, what is this? Is this
You're spot on.
relative or, I mean,
Yeah, not a relative, but
maybe
horses
couldn't have
are
a
like,
baby, or I don't know.
I honestly can't remember if she's foaled or not. And somebody asked me that before, and I swore I was going to look it up, and I think I forgot to look it up. But as far as we know, she's fertile. But horses are like any other creature. They're interested in other moms' babies, and sometimes the other mom doesn't let them near. The mom of the baby on the West End, to me, the few times I've seen her, is surprisingly unconcerned about other horses getting close. I mean, I would have chased them off. But she seems not.
Than the black.
Right, right. So the dark mare is more interested in the baby than the mom is concerned about keeping the other horses away. So, and I don't know. I mean, the black mare doesn't seem to mean any ill will or any harm. I mean, she's just interested. So that's fine. So she has two. The baby has two looking out for us.
So we had that.
Hold that way.
I think that's happened before, and if you recall, we had a mare who had a shattered hip. She had apparently sustained a blow, probably a full-on kick, broadside, and it shattered her hip. And we watched her for a while, monitored for a while, and finally made the decision that she was not getting better. In fact, she was in pain. And and it was also going to be difficult for her if she got down to get back up. And so rather than allow her to suffer, we made the decision to intervene and humanely euthanize her. And she was part of a harem that had a mare with a foal. And when we put the mare down, the foal stayed there and watched her for a long time while the harem continued, including his mother, continued to go. And so I wondered if there was a crazy old aunt, even though the mare that we euthanized unfortunately was not old. But I just wondered if he was obviously very attached to her and stood and watched for a while. So I just, I think that I've seen that with some other older mare. And again, this one was young, but still. So I don't think it's entirely unheard of. I think it happens in other.
Yeah, especially being on the West End where there's so many people. I mean, it's just a population center. So, yeah, hold that because
Are our horses happy? Are they happy up there?
Oh, you mean the wild horses?
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, can you imagine what it would be like to just be able to go, basically go where you want, eat where you want, within reason? I mean, if the stallion tells you no, or if you're the stallion and you have to tell your mares no. But basically, to have the freedom to go where you want, eat where you want. The social structure out there. I mean, even with domestic horses, we geld the males. Which you kind of have to do. You can't have a bunch of intact males and a bunch of females because you'd have babies and you'd have the males hurting each other over the fences and in the fences and stuff like that. So, they actually get the full social experience that, other horses don't get. So, yeah, I think so. And
I'll just add that you can tell by a horse's body language when they're not happy.
That's true.
They will. Well, if you see ears pinned back, if you see head drop, other behaviors that indicates that someone is doing something that's displeasing to them, then you'll know it's pretty obvious. If they're out there grazing, ears forward, focused on what they're doing, focused on one another, which is much easier when we're away from them, then yeah, they're happy.
Second question, and I mean, can they tell us when hurricanes are coming sooner or not, or what do they do?
So I'm not sure that they have, well, they probably do have predictive ability, but I've not learned to read it. I mean, like, they've shown that elephants, for example, have the ability to predict stuff, and villagers have actually been able to see this behavior and then possibly interpret it in time to do something about it. And there was some tsunamis, right, where the animals left and the villagers only then realized, there's a reason why they left. So yeah, we've not really been able to figure out from the horses what's coming, but the fact that we don't lose animals, horses, in storms. The water rises and the tide rises and the winds blow and there are sheets of rain and we go back out after the storm and for the most part they're all fine. They obviously are able to take care of themselves. So
those woods are very thick, those live oak groves out there are very thick, and that provides dense cover.
Just have to ask. I had a dog that could predict stuff.
Does the storm tide not wash completely over Shackleford?
it doesn't tend to. Now there are low places on the island where if you go back out, the question was, we probably should have been doing this all along for those who are on the recording, but there are places on Shackleford where when you come back out after the storm, you can see the vegetation is all like laid over and the new sand deposited so that you know the water washed over, during the storm or just during a high tide with wind. And my suspicion is the horses move away from that area and they go to a thicker foliage, which is going to be higher. or a higher area, yeah. So.
So
Yeah.
when the horses do die on the island, do you remove them or do you leave them to decompose on the island?
Yeah, so we leave them because, to take 600 pounds off is like, then you'd have to bury them on the mainland. So we just, if they happen to die in a place where there's a lot of people, we try to move them so that, you don't want to ruin somebody's vacation by having obviously there are dead animals out there all the time, but we try to avoid that kind of thing. But the size of the hole that you would need to dig with a shovel to bury, it's just, yeah, we leave them, yeah.
Cases where you're not sure of a cause and then you would remove them to autopsy?
So if we're gonna do an autopsy, we call it necropsy that's fine. It's the same thing. We try to do it on the island just because it's easier than moving the animal. But on the other hand, there's a bunch of stuff you could do in a well-lit, not wind-blown, not sandy place with running water that you can't do out there. So, there have been times when we've just taken horses off for necropsies, normally smaller animals that are easier to transport. And like Paula took a foal off for us more than several years ago, that somebody had reported dead. And it was like, she was there, she was nearby, she checked it out, it was in fact dead. So sometimes we can do that kind of thing. Yeah, because if you find something like that and can alert us to that, any data we can get, we're really happy to get.
I was going to say, we take as many samples as we can based on the age, how long it's been since it died, because all of that just adds to our knowledge. We've been collecting blood samples over the years from any horse that we have to lay down, quote unquote, for any purpose. Even if it's just to sedate them, to do something. We've tried to pull blood just so we'll have that in the database and be able to refer to that at some point. So yeah, we take samples where we can, for sure.
Basically, is it vultures?
We don't have a lot of we don't have a lot of vulture activity. The vultures have been singularly unhelpful in helping us find dead horses. 2 times in the whole time I've been here have I flushed vultures and found dead horses. They're not very helpful.
What do you say comes and eats coyotes?
Yeah.
That's why we can bury ours, because they dig in right back up.
Yeah, but a lot just the natural decomposition with, insects, beetles, decomposition.
In that environment, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
I'm glad it's not near dinner time.
That is kind of a thing to note to end on, right?
Yeah.
But maybe that is a good ending point.
Well, and to answer your questions, the horse, they have a blast out there.
Well, yeah.
Have a blast. They have a blast.
They play like they
They do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, some of the videos of the new foal on the West End. We had so many people keeping an eye on the foal that we have a lot of videos of her playing, and she's just like, running zoomies, running circles and bucking and kicking and sliding to a stop.
And she's verbal. I mean, you can hear her.
Oh, is she verbal too?
She whinnies. You can hear her whinny, and you can hear like gurgle a little, like and I'm not talking about being close. I'm talking about just in a distance.
Well, depending on the wind, you can hear stuff. If the wind carries it, you can hear stuff quite a ways.
We don't want to interfere.
Yeah. But, well, we have enough wildlife cameras out there that we've got some pretty good ideas of what they do around water holes at least. Yeah. So.
And some good pictures of your
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Every time we go to one of the cameras, we make sure to wave.
Thank you
Just
all
to
for
give
coming.